from the Washington, D.C. area. It's the Inside Scoop, all the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop, Virginia. My name is Bettina Lawton, and I'm your host. And tonight, we're going to be talking about voter outreach. Everyone knows by now, if you've been reading the paper, listening to the radio, that voter registration in Virginia ends today. If it's not postmarked by today, then you don't get to vote if you're not registered. So now we're going to switch over to talk about, we have all of these people who are registered to vote. How do we get them to the polls? And with me to discuss that is Cesar de Aguila. Cesar is the chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. He is a first-generation American, and we're going to talk with him about the Hispanic minority outreach and the Asian American, and generally what the Democrats are doing to try and ensure a fair election this year. So thank you for coming on the show, Cesar.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's talk. You have some experience, actually, with New American voting, as I
do.
With your mom? It's your mom?
Love my mom. Mom, if you're out there, love you. I'm going to tell a story about you. I hope it's not too bad. My mom obviously came to this country. She's very proud of her heritage, but one of the first memories I have was when she became a citizen. It was like one of the proudest days. I saw her smile, and you know, she was American, had her little flag and everything out there, so I was just very proud. But there was another time I saw her, and she was equally as happy. It was the day she first voted. And she came home, she was all excited, and you know, she claims not to have an accent, but she said, you know, I voted for Clinton, right? So being young, we kind of asked her, well, why did you do that? And she explained why she voted for Clinton. And she explained, you know, because Democrats, they help us, they help people. And I think, I didn't know it at the time, but we were instilled with those values. And that's why I'm a Democrat. That's why I want to make sure everyone that has a right to vote gets to vote. It's a great feeling to be part of this great democracy. Well,
that's a great story. And it's terrific when we can remember things like that about our parents, because so often it's a blur. Yeah. You know, you're a little kid, you're just not paying attention.
No, that's stuck with us.
That's stuck with you. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Virginia, because Virginia, as everybody knows, is a battleground state.
We are.
People, depending on who you talk to, anybody in Virginia will say you can't get to the White House except through Virginia. Of course, everyone from Ohio says you can't get there except through Ohio. But we're Virginia, we're going with the Virginia.
And it goes through Fairfax County.
And, well, and now that's, I understand, is the way it goes. If Obama does not win big in Fairfax, he doesn't have a chance of winning the state. Is that true?
Right. That's absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Okay. In 2008, Obama took Virginia by 53%.
That's right.
And the first time since LBJ, I think, that Virginia went for a Democrat.
Correct.
And the black vote was 92% Obama. The voters under 30, the youth vote, was 60% to Obama. The seniors were 53%. So they actually paralleled the entire voting population. Is there any expectation that we're going to get that much of a turnout this year?
It's absolutely expected. We've been working really hard to certainly register voters. And now as the voter registration phase closes, we move on to the next phase. But absolutely, it's my expectation. I've spoken to the committee, the volunteers. We have a target that we're looking to get, and we've been working hard to get to that number.
Well, a poll came out, a Pew Research poll came out on Friday. It was in the Washington Post that said Obama has a 3-to-1 advantage right now in Virginia. And
I tell everyone ignore the polls. I ignore polls, but okay.
You'll take that poll?
Yeah, sure. But
now, why do you tell people to ignore the polls?
Because I think at any given moment, people get distracted. And I think as long as we do what we're supposed to do, registering voters and making sure people get to vote, that's basically all we can control. And to get people excited or depressed over a poll any given day, I just try to lead by example. I don't pay attention to those polls.
Okay, well, and that kind of makes sense. It's just sort of you wait till the end It's that old Kenny Rogers,
That's
gambler
right.
song about, you don't count them while
Fold
you're
'em,
sitting at
hold
the
'em.
table.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
You wait till it gets
right.
to the end.
Absolutely.
So, 23.7 million voters nationwide are Hispanic. They are eligible to vote. They are 11% of the total populace. There was, in this poll, 77% of the Hispanics who are eligible to vote said they are absolutely positive they're going to come out and vote. The regular non-Hispanic population of voters, 89% said that they were going to come out and vote. So what's being done, at least here in Fairfax County or in Virginia, to try and get those Hispanic numbers up?
So with respect to Hispanic voters, and we can talk about the different other groups as well, but with respect to Spanish-speaking voters, we've done outreach. We've done things in Spanish. We've done basically grip cards. We've done videos. We've done messaging. We've done interviews. So anything to inform them and basically guide them to the polls. Certainly to register to vote, their families, and also turning out to vote early. It's our hope that a lot of people vote early, that can vote early, get to the polls to vote early. So,
well, voting early in Virginia is not a guarantee. You have to qualify.
Absolutely.
How hard is it to qualify?
Well, it's not super difficult if you travel outside the county, if you're part of a political party, if you're working the polls, if you're an election official, if you just if you have to be out of town, if you're a student, if you're traveling on business, they're allowing certain folks to vote early that qualify. So.
Okay. And early voting is open in Fairfax.
It's been open absolutely since it's been a couple weeks.
Voting. Right.
Yeah, so
and it's moving out into more broadly, because as I understand it was just the government center, and now it's going to be all over the county.
That's right. So
on Wednesday, right?
Wednesday the 17th, the satellite offices open up. So folks don't have to drive from Mount Vernon to the government center. They can basically vote at their satellite government offices in every district. Okay. So the 9 magisterial districts will have voting available to those residents.
And going to if you Google Fairfax Board of Election, you'll come up with that chart and the names and the locations and the hours and all that stuff.
That's right. And if not, you can always contact your fairfaxdemocrats.org and we'll help you out. Absolutely.
On the website, it will be there.
That's
all right. That's excellent. Let me ask about these voter ID laws. We've done a lot of shows here on the voter ID laws, both in Virginia as they were being debated and nationwide. Where does that stand? What do you think the impact's going to be? What can people bring?
Yeah, so a little bit of background. I mean, we were one of the states that were targeted with voter ID laws. And the premise was there was a lot of voter fraud going on. Well, we haven't found any. So I'm eager for someone, if they know big voter fraud's happening, we want to know about it. But the reality is we haven't seen it. So maybe we offer up a Mitt Romney $10,000 bet for every instance of voter fraud going on. We'll have at it.
Well, I do have to interject here that the Republican Party in Virginia did announce a week or two ago that they had fired the company that they had soliciting voter registration forms, because it turned out that the individual involved actually had been submitting false registration forms in. So apparently the voter fraud.
Well, let's make sure we understand. There is registration fraud that happens when you incent people to register a lot of voters. Some people will go out there and register Mickey Mouse, neighbors, dead people, and they then get compensated for coming back for finding 100 new voters. That's different than someone going to the polls and claiming they are someone else trying to vote.
And that's what the voter ID laws are supposed to deal with, right?
Bingo, exactly. So again, these are two separate issues that get conflated, and we're specific. We're talking about someone going to the polls claiming that there's someone else trying to vote in that person's name.
Okay.
Okay. So the voter ID laws have addressed it in terms of you can still bring your voter registration card, a driver's license, a utility bill, a concealed weapons permit. There are several things you can bring to the polls. Okay. And you can bring those on election day, but you can also bring them early at your satellite office, because we want everyone voting early that can vote early. It will eliminate a lot of the chaos we're expecting on election day. There's just going to be a lot of people voting.
Right.
So
I remember that from '08. It was just huge lines, people waiting, and even though the polls close at 7, if you're in line at 7, you can vote. But there were enormous lines.
Yeah,
hours
machines
and hours.
break, just things happen. So we're encouraging everyone to make sure they have the right ID. And again, our goal is, even if there's an issue on election day, we want them voting. We don't want them casting a provisional ballot. Mm-hmm. We want them to actually cast a ballot on election day. That's our goal.
We're going to run, hopefully, the PSA that the Fairfax Democrats did in Spanish.
I'm very proud of these.
And so let's see if we can do that. We've only got about a minute and a half before we go to the actual break. So let's see if we can get it up. How's that going to go? Here we go.
¿Se le complicará votar en las elecciones presidenciales de noviembre? En mayo, Virginia aprobó una nueva ley de identificación electoral, la cual amplía los tipos de identificación que los votantes pueden traer a las urnas electorales. Estas son una factura de servicios públicos, un estado de cuenta del banco, un cheque del gobierno o su cheque de pago. Cada una debe de tener su nombre impreso y la dirección. También puede traer una identificación válida con fotografía, una licencia de conducir o una identificación con fotografía del Departamento de Motores y Vehículos. Si usted no trae ninguna de ellas, su voto será solamente provisional y se le dificultará más después, porque usted debería presentar su identificación máximo hasta el mediodía del tercer día de realizarse las elecciones. Virginia jugará un papel importante en decidir la elección presidencial. Asegúrese de que su voto cuente.
Basically, bring the right IDs when you come to vote, and we did these in Korean, we did them in Mandarin, Japanese. We wanted to produce not only video, but information, grip cards, things that people could get to and disseminate to all those different ethnic groups.
And if someone wants to run this, they can just contact Fairfax Democrats and you give it to them?
Go to our website, absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Excellent. Well, I can hear the music, which means we are getting ready to go to break, and I think, if we're getting it set up right, we may actually run the English version of that, so people will know what was being said in the Spanish version.
We've got that too.
So we're good. So stay with us. We will be right back.
Will you be prevented from voting in the November presidential election? Virginia enacted a new voter ID law in May. It expands the types of identification voters can bring to the polls. But if you don't bring one of them, you can only cast a provisional ballot. Then it gets harder, because you must get your ID by noon on the third day after the election to your local election office for your vote to be valid. You can avoid that by bringing a current utility bill, a bank statement, a government check, or your paycheck, but each must have your printed name and address. You can also bring a valid employee photo ID, a driver's license, or a photo ID from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Virginia will play a major role in deciding the presidential election. Make sure your vote counts.
다가오는 대통령 선거에 여러분의 소중한 한 표를 행사하기 위한 서류가 준비되셨나요? 버지니아주는 지난 5월 유권자 신분 확인을 위한 새로운 법안을 제정했는데요. 이 법안은 기존에 비해 다양한 형태의 신분증을 사용할 수 있도록 했습니다. 하지만 신분증을 지참하지 않으시면 선거당일 개표에 포함되지 않는 예비투표용지밖에 사용하실 수 없습니다. 예비투표를 유효하게 만들려면 반드시 선거 3일 뒤 정오까지 본인 지역구 선거사무실에 신분증을 제시하셔야 합니다. 이런 불편을 피하시려면 투표소에 나오실 때 다음 서류 중 하나를 꼭 지참하셔야 합니다. 가장 최근의 공공요금 청구서, 은행 명세서, 정부에서 발행한 수표, 이름과 주소가 명시된 월급수표, 이 밖에도 운전면허증, 사진이 첨부된 직원신분증, 교통국에서 발행된 사진이 붙은 신분증을 사용하실 수 있습니다. 버지니아주는 이번 대통령 선거에서 가장 중요한 접전 지역 중 하나입니다. 여러분의 소중한 한 표를 꼭 행사해 주세요.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Here with Cesar de Aguila. He is the chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, and we are talking about voter outreach. Now that today was the last day for voter registration, we're now turning to getting those voters out to actually vote. So I wanted to talk, and those people who just were watching, who saw our public service announcements, you saw two of them. You saw the English version of the voter identification information that was out, and then the Korean version. So you've seen two of them. There's also a Chinese version, and all of them, as before we went to the break, as Cesar told us, if you're interested in running them or posting them someplace, just contact the Fairfax Democratic Committee and ask, and they will be sent to you. They are free. So let's talk voter suppression, because I hear there was a lot of talk about voter suppression in the past. Is that all resolved? Do we need to worry about it in Fairfax?
Oh, well, this is one of the things I'm losing a little sleep over. It's a concern of ours. There are people that are playing off this fraud theme, which, again, doesn't exist as far as we're concerned from a voting perspective. So we're probably going to escalate some of our concerns publicly in the next day or two here to address some of the areas that we really want to see changed. But we're letting the process work. We're letting the infrastructure known that we have some concerns because it's directly geared to what we believe is suppressing some folks to vote. And we're just not able to stand by and let that happen.
And the people whose vote is being suppressed, I'm assuming, are the folks more likely to vote Democratic: seniors, minorities, right, youth, those types of folks.
Yeah, and my view, and I take this to heart from my parents, where obviously I got some of this. Just because you speak a different language doesn't mean your voice should not be heard. Mm-hmm. And it's in those communities that people tend to be a little less sure about what they're supposed to do to make their voice count. They're perfectly legal, they're citizens, they're proud Americans, but some of this confusion may keep them from voting. And we want to make sure they know exactly what to do. And we're going to have the right people in place, election officials, being able to help people cast their votes.
Now, I heard a story about you. I don't know if it's true, but okay. I heard a story that you went in to vote, not looking like the businessman that you are, and to see whether or not you would have any problems. How did that go? Was that true?
That was absolutely true. Great research there. And so, yeah, I went in baseball cap, unshaved, and I did not have any problems. Some of my other folks have. So that's where the concern is. We want just consistent rules applied to everyone. And no one should have been turned away if they have the proper ID and they are legally registered to vote.
And what did you have for your ID?
I had my voter ID card.
And every registered voter should have received a new voter ID card in the last couple weeks, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a good thing. Just take it with you. That counts.
That's all you need. And if you don't have that, you can have any multiple combinations of other forms of ID we've discussed.
Okay.
So, and they're available on the State Board election website. They're available on our website. And if anyone has any questions, call the Fairfax Democratic Committee.
Okay. Before we went to break, you made a reference to, we want people to cast an actual ballot that day.
Yes.
Not a provisional ballot.
Absolutely.
What's the problem with a provisional ballot?
Well, the provisional ballot, and again, it's not an issue in concept, but if you're a working class person that you have to take off from work, that means if you're casting a provisional ballot, you're coming back the next Friday. before an election official to prove that you are who you say you are with the proper ID. So bring all your ID on election day. We're going to have people out there instructing them what they need. If they don't have it, we're going to ask you go home and get it so you can cast that ballot. We don't want provisional ballots cast for our folks on election day.
Well, a lot of folks, because you've got that 3-day window to prove you are who you say you are.
Right.
That's a little tough for a lot of folks
Absolutely.
to meet.
If you're taking mass transit, if you need a ride, again, for some people, it's a little bit of a task to cast your ballot.
Okay, so bring the right ID.
Absolutely.
Vote on the machines, either the electronic or the paper.
Absolutely.
And some people prefer the paper ballots, thinking they're better than the machines. There's actually, I mean, I'm that way. I like to know that there's a trail of, you know, this is my old accounting background. I like paper trails everywhere.
Hey, my mom won't touch a computer, so
Right.
she wants paper.
Absolutely.
Something tactile. Absolutely.
And they need to be, and they will give that to you. That's got to be available.
And you
Okay.
can make that request.
Okay.
So.
All right, well, good. Well, let's talk about some other outreach efforts that are going on. I know there has been, and there was a week or so ago in the Post and in the Fairfax Times, we'll give a shout out to those folks, an article about outreach to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And I saw in that article that under the 2010 census, they are now a larger minority voting bloc than blacks or Hispanics are in Virginia particularly. And the actor B.D. Wong, who's a Law and Order, plays the psychologist guy, he was actually in Fairfax at the Falls Church office for Obama a week or two ago, had a lot of folks come down for that. What kind of outreach is being done for those folks? And are they, the other question is, how much outreach are the Democrats going to do? Because there's a perception that a lot of them are Republicans.
Well, not by our polling data and not by our membership. We have a very, very active membership within the committee. Witness the results, the PSAs, the lit we're printing. We are targeting those groups. It's our hope that once a lot of folks see the effort, our values, our solutions, that it becomes a very clear choice for them. So in addition to some of the outreach, we internally, through the county committee, we have people that are actually sponsoring some events and sort of get to meet your candidates' forums. So we're doing a lot of things in all these different communities. We have a very diverse committee, and it should reflect the very diverse county that we have. I think Fairfax County is the most diverse county in the Commonwealth. So I think that speaks to how we're approaching this.
Well, let me ask you about another group that people regularly malign, and that's the youth.
Oh, okay.
They showed up in 08. So 51% or so of the youth vote showed up to vote. It, of course, immediately plunged to less than half of that in the following year. But, and you see a lot of talking back and forth of, will the youth show up, won't they show up, what do they really care about? I know that the president was over at George Mason a week or so ago, huge crowds there.
Right.
There was a bus, a Gotta Vote bus.
The Gotta Vote bus tour.
Gotta Vote bus tour was down at Virginia Tech today. And GottaVote.com is a place you can go to make sure that you're registered to vote. So if you aren't sure, you can go there and check.
Right.
What kind of things, what do you think of the youth? Are they going to show up? Do they care? Have they fallen back into that sort of, I don't, you know, well, everybody's the same, all politicians are the same?
So yes, they have to turn out. B, we are doing everything we can at the ground level here to make sure we identify them, register new voters. If you've noticed, it wasn't by accident that the PSAs that we produced were all folks of a younger generation. Specifically, we think it's sort of a point to leverage young people bringing their families, their grandparents, that becomes a family affair to go vote. And we, again, within the Fairfax County Committee, we have a youth outreach committee. So we're looking at the community colleges, the colleges, as well as the high schools. So setting up groups and leveraging them to do their own recruiting. It's my expectation that the youth vote will absolutely turn out again.
Okay. Well, let's use our last 3 minutes or so to talk issues, because I've seen discrepancies. In the big Pew research that was done, in the poll that was issued, they surveyed Hispanic voters, and 37% of the Hispanic voters in that poll said that immigration was their number one. But in a poll that was just released today by Latinos for America's Vote, in Virginia, only Virginia, it said there was just a slim majority that placed immigration at the top of their list. So what do you think the difference is? Why would people in Virginia, why would Hispanics in Virginia be more concerned about it than Hispanics in the rest of the country?
Oh, obviously the region has a lot to do with that. We're a pretty transient area. If you look at the districts within the county, you look at Mount Vernon, the Lee District, even parts of Falls Church. I mean, it's a very Hispanic community, but there's a lot of people moving in and out of the area, specifically in those groups. And it becomes a family issue. It becomes a family issue because, you know, maybe a brother or cousin that maybe came here by some other means, they're at that age where they can't find work. And then suddenly it becomes, wow, my friend, my brother, my cousin, my mom is potentially going to be deported. So it's an issue. It hits home. And that happens as you have, in what I feel, a transient area.
Okay. Otherwise, are there other major issues other than immigration? I mean, that's the obvious one when you're talking minorities. Or do they really fall into the same kind of concerns that the rest of the voters have?
In general, everyone wants to work and take care of their families. Everyone wants a fair shot at the American dream. So the economic, the jobs, you know, those all play in what people prioritize. Healthcare. You know, if folks can't get yearly checkups, you'll miss something. And then you're left to emergency room care. That is just not a sustainable solution for anyone, let alone the Hispanic community or minority communities that, in general, are less wealthy, less educated, if you just compare them. So it becomes a bigger issue at that point.
Okay. Well, the Latinos for America vote poll that came out today has Obama at 66%, and it has Tim Kaine, who's running for Senate, at 64%. So, and that's as of today's.
A message to my Latino brother, let's get those polls up higher then.
Right,
okay.
Exactly.
We're not doing enough.
All right, well, I want to thank you, Cesar, for coming on.
Pleasure.
And folks can go to fairfaxdemocrats.org for more information. Stay with us. We will be right back.
One day these rats will play another one. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about ripped off life. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water. At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site. That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff. You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People! The flood is imminent!
Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton, the host of Inside Scoop Virginia, and today we are talking about get out the vote efforts and outreach to various types of constituency groups. And we have, for this segment and the next segment, Ray Vickery, who's going to talk to us about seniors. We talked with Cesar de Aguila about minorities and the youth vote. We're going to the other end of the spectrum now to talk about seniors. So Ray Vickery is a senior director of the Albright Stonebridge Group, which is a global strategy firm where you advise clients on India-related matters. He's widely known for his work in promoting U.S.-India economic development and has many years of experience advising multinational corporations. He is also counsel to a transnational law firm called Hogan Lovells. And he was at one point in time in the Virginia House of Delegates for 3 terms. And during the Clinton years, Mr. Vickery served as Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development. So welcome. I'm so glad you could come, Ray.
Glad to be here.
Okay. None of that says seniors to me.
Well.
Okay. I mean, it all kind of says big business, economic development. It doesn't say seniors. How did you get involved in senior stuff?
Well, all you have to do is look at me and see. I'm 70 years old.
Whoa.
I served in the General Assembly when I was a young man, and I've had a career that's brought me to a number of things. But we're now, the baby boomers have gotten to a point where we are seniors. And so it's sort of a natural progression for me. And my friends and I very much concerned that that senior issues be recognized for what they are, and that the true story get out, the facts get out to people who are of senior age.
Now, what do you, when you say that the true story gets out and the issues get out, what kind of issues are you and your friends dealing with? And this is a personal effort. You're not a representative of a particular campaign or any of that type of stuff. This is you and your friends going out. Obviously, as I understand this, the issues that you like, the positions that you like are on the Democratic side of the ledger. But it's not, you're not here as an official representative speaking on it.
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
But I am a strong supporter of the president and his reelection. Early on this year, we got together a group of people who were very much interested in issues. We had people in from the campaign, Eric Cage, who's a policy director, and we talked about the issues, and we talked about what was important to people in the various categories, some of which you and Cesar have just talked about. One of the areas, of course, which I think is of most concern is what happens with seniors. And it seemed to me and to the folks that I was talking with that a lot of misinformation had been spread, particularly about what's now called Obamacare, and the president doesn't have any problem with that designation, the Affordable Care Act, and how that fits with Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and those issues which are very much a part of the concerns of seniors as they go to vote.
Well, and that's kind of interesting, because when I hear about the Affordable Care Act, I hear about you know, daily visits and well women stuff, and keep your kids on your plan till they're 26, which is a huge benefit to a lot of both children and their families. I haven't actually heard or focused in on the effect of Obamacare on seniors. What is that?
Well, it very much has an effect. First of all, pre-existing conditions, for example. Many seniors have pre-existing conditions, kind of by definition.
Right.
And if an insurance company can simply knock you off of your policy because of a pre-existing condition, that's extremely serious. Another thing that the insurance companies were doing is lifetime caps and year caps. And because seniors are greater consumers of health care, those caps worked a very great hardship. And it is absolutely the case that Obamacare deals directly with those. Obamacare also deals directly with the whole viability of Medicare. Because of the Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, it is true that the viability of the whole Medicare system has been extended by 8 years from 2016 to 2024. So that's a very important part of it. But you know, the act is not called Affordable Care Act for nothing. And the reason it's called that is because the president feels very strongly, and I feel very strongly, that people shouldn't go broke because they get sick. And I can tell you, one of the things that we've been doing is going around and having a group of doctors who feel as strongly as I do about this, and talk to people in retirement communities, in places where they are getting assistance. And you see time after time people who've lost everything, who can't go back to their apartment or whatever because they went in the hospital and they went broke. And that shouldn't be. I don't think that's civilized, really. Well, but that is a case that happens particularly to seniors.
Well, and I'd heard at one point in time that one of the biggest causes of bankruptcy in the United States is not spending like a crazy person on your credit cards, you know, for frivolous matters, but it's actually medical conditions. It's health care that is driving a great number of people into bankruptcy.
Yes, there's a professor down at my old alma mater, Duke University, who's done quite a bit of work this at the Sanford School of Public Policy. And one of the leading causes of people slipping from a middle-class existence into poverty is, in fact, health problems and the inability to be able to pay for them. And that is very much on seniors' minds, and is one of the reasons that we thought it important to do the outreach that we're doing.
Now, I have heard of dollar caps. When you said, you know, one of the things that Obamacare does away with is dollar caps, and then you said year caps. What's a year cap?
Well, there are two kinds of caps, and the one that's been done away with already is the overall cap for the life of the policy, if you will. And some other policies will have an annual cap that you can't go above a certain amount of expenditure that the insurance company will pay for. Now, that hasn't been done away with, but is scheduled to go away in 2014 under Obamacare. So both those kinds of caps will be done away with under the Affordable Care Act.
Okay. Well, and I know the pre-existing condition is a massive issue for older people, for people who are disabled, and it's something that I look at. I have a personal interest in people with multiple sclerosis. My sister has multiple sclerosis. And so I'm always grievously offended when Ann Romney talks about how she had this burden of having multiple sclerosis. And I thought, yes, but you didn't need to worry about exceeding your limits. You didn't need to worry about losing your health care. You didn't have to worry about all of those things that so many people who, as they age and they start getting these diseases, that was a really, really big concern. Now, do you think people really understand what Obamacare does for seniors?
No, I don't think so. And in part, it's because of a lot of misinformation that's been spread about it. One of the things which bothers me most of all is this repeated charge that the Affordable Care Act takes money out of Medicare and makes it less viable. Well, the reality is that the president and his advisors figured out a way to be able to pay the insurance companies less where they didn't deserve it. There are some other cuts that are done that the drug companies were getting, and so you came up with savings. Now, that savings helps to make the system more viable, as I said, extended from 2016 to 24, not less viable. And so to say that people are getting less, $700 billion less in care is absolutely wrong, and that's one of the things that people ought to understand.
Well, and you do see, I see those commercials all the time from the Romney-Ryan ticket talking about that $700 billion. And one of the things that I thought was kind of odd was I read some article, one of these fact check kind of things that said, A, that's wrong, and B, in the Ryan budget itself, there's the same number.
Exactly.
He's got the same number. So it's kind of like attacking Obamacare and President Obama for something that's already incorporated into his own budget.
Well, the Romney team seems to be adept at that. I mean, all you have to do is look at the Massachusetts system and Romney Care, if you will,
right,
which served as a model, and yet they attack it for the very things that they're doing. So it doesn't make much sense, and I think people ought to understand that, and particularly when seniors get the facts and hold up the facts on one side and then the other side, it seems to me they'll make the right choice.
Well, you've got kind of a moving target, though. I mean, I remember early on where Romney made this statement, the first thing I'm going to do when I'm elected president, day one, is I'm going to repeal Obamacare. Now, putting aside for the fact that the president can't repeal the legislation on his own initiative, now he sort of suddenly started saying, well, yeah, there are parts of it I like. And then he seemed to be saying, well, you know, I actually started this in Massachusetts. And it's kind of, you've got kind of a moving target as you try to educate people as to what, here's the president's position on things, here's the opposition's position on things, because that seems to be moving a lot.
Well, Bettina, you will recall that during the primaries when Governor Romney was moving rapidly to the right, one of his advisors said, well, don't worry about it. It'll just be like an Etch-a-Sketch. We'll just turn it over when we get there, and it'll come out. And that is exactly what is going on. Of course, if you read the polls, the provisions that I've been talking about, the provision about being able to keep on the insurance until you're 26, those things are very popular now that people know about them. And so Governor Romney seems to be saying, yeah, we'll keep those, but that, of course, is disingenuous because you can't really just take out a few provisions and say, oh, well, those will be fine, and not do anything about the whole substance of the way it works. You know, I feel very strongly about wellness. My brother, Dr. Don Vickery, wrote a book several years ago about take care of yourself and when take care of your child. And he was a pioneer in regard to wellness. Now, one of the things that this act does is actually pick up on that. And wellness is very important for seniors because if they can get the test, they can find out what's going on with their heart, whether or not there's a cancer screening, then many of those things can be addressed and people can live healthy, productive lives, as opposed to saying, well, you know, I'm 70 years old now, I've got some problem, and I can't really do that much. So I think that altogether it makes a great story for the president.
All right, well, we're going to pick up on that when we come back because we are going to break. But stay with us because we will be back with Ray Vickery to talk about outreach to seniors in this election cycle. Stay with us.
Saving for retirement might be easy for some folks,
but for
others, it might take a little more work. And for those who haven't started, there are still things you can do to catch up.
Oh, that is good news.
Like getting out from underneath past debt. And don't get wrapped up with high-interest credit cards.
Get you some eyes.
Be diversified with your investments. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Your financial goals are not out of reach. The choice is clear. For a happy ending, choose to save.
Everyone with alcohol and drug addiction is in the same boat. With treatment, you can find solid ground. For drug and alcohol information and treatment referral for you or someone you know, call 1-800-662-HELP.
Dude, are you sure you want this tattoo? Because just do it.
Some mistakes in life are permanent. Like hearing loss. To learn how to protect your hearing, visit asha.org.
You've probably heard about heart disease, but did you know that it's the #1 killer of women nationwide? Heart disease claims more lives each year than breast cancer, lung cancer, or strokes combined. But there are steps you can take to protect yourself against it. For more information on how you can prevent heart disease, contact your local American Heart Association or visit their website at www.americanheart.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop.
Start again. Welcome back. I'm Bettina Lawton. This is Inside Scoop Virginia Politics. We are here with Ray Vickery, and we are talking about seniors in this election cycle. And what I want to go back to, though, is what constitutes a senior? Because some of the surveys that I've seen say they're 65 and above. Other people are 55. You can get some benefits some places if you're only 50. So when we're talking about seniors, what are we talking about for purposes of political analysis type stuff?
Well, generally for political analysis, 55 and above is considered senior, and that segment of the population, that segment of the voting population is rapidly growing. Over the past couple of decades, for example, Bettina, in Northern Virginia, it's gone from 18 to 26%. And it's actually higher than that statewide, 55 and above. And with the baby boom generation coming over, it is going to skyrocket. It will go up to about 38% of all the electorate in 2020, and it'll plateau there after at about 40% before it starts to come down again. Of course, 65 is the Medicare age, so some people say, well, 65 is it. And then, of course, there are other places where there have been compromises in 62, 67. Right. Governor Romney says he wants to raise Social Security retirement age is one way to do that. And so it depends on it. But my view is that it's really at a time in your life in which you can be more productive really than you've been because you get to a point where hopefully you have some wherewithal and you have some experience in order to be able to apply it. So I think it's very important for politics that seniors be involved and that there be an outreach to them. Now, one of the things that's interesting to me is people usually think that, well, seniors are mostly Republican, but that's not true. No. Fact is that there are more seniors, whether you define them as 55 and above or 65 and above, who consider themselves Democrats than Republicans. What does change with age is the number of independents who start identifying themselves as Republican. I'm not sure exactly why that is, and that's the reason for doing this outreach, really, because it seems to me when you hold up the policies of the president and the Democrats and compare them with those of the challenger and the Republicans, it's plain that those policies that the seniors are much better off under the president's policies.
And so how are you doing this? You're going out to assisted living centers or retirement? How are you?
It varies in terms of where the residents are. I mean, it goes all the way from places which are designated senior communities. I'll be going out to one with a doctor, which is something that you wouldn't consider at all. Seniors, all kinds of activities, to places where people do get medical assistance along with the living facility. One of the things that, as I say, that really bothers me about this when you go to some of the assisted living facilities is that there are people in there who really shouldn't be there. But what has happened is that they had a health incident. They went into the hospital, they came out, went through some sort of rehab. They are really ready to go back into society, but they've lost their apartments, they've lost a place to live, and there's no place other than there for them to live. Now that just isn't right. And that, as I said, is one of the areas which the Affordable Care Act addresses fundamentally.
Now, there's Medicare, there's Medicaid, there's the Affordable Care Act, and they all are supposed to work together in some fashion to help the seniors with health care and standard of living and things like that. Does some combination of them allow a senior who may become disabled, who doesn't want to go to assisted living? Because most seniors I've met, they don't want to go. They want to stay at home.
Absolutely.
Is there something in this mix that allows people to do that?
Yes, I think one of the great things about the Affordable Care Act is that it for the very first time gets different segments of the healthcare industry talking and working together. That is, hospitals with rehab and the kinds of therapies that one needs, together with wellness, the preventive. And so a holistic approach is brought in. These are specific provisions in the Affordable Care Act. First time it's really ever been done on a large scale in the United States. And one of the tragedies, Bettina, is we're making so much progress already in terms of bringing together this approach that if we stop now and just throw it all out the window, that progress will be lost. But it's definitely a part of the act to get those various segments of the health industry working together.
Well, let's talk about the other big elder issue, which is sitting out there, which is Social Security.
Right.
You mentioned briefly that Governor Romney talks about raising the retirement age, which for folks who are, lawyers like you and I, telling me you've got to work another year or two, not a big deal. If I'm out working construction and you tell me I got to work another year or two, that can be a huge deal for someone who is older. What's the differences with the Social Security? Is that a big issue? What's the president doing on that? When you go out and talk to people and they want to say, well, what's the deal?
Well, here again, the president is sort of shooting at a moving target. Mm-hmm. Because just a little bit of history, as you know, in 2005, George W. Bush introduced a privatization kind of proposal. At the time, certainly the vice presidential candidate, Congressman Ryan, got on board with that, and it appeared that Governor Romney did as well. Now, Governor Romney evidently has backed off of that and says, yeah, he wants to have private accounts, but he wants them to be supplemental as opposed to replacing. Now, Congressman Ryan hasn't really made that distinction clear, and it's plain that the Republican platform very strongly endorses some sort of privatization. Well, I think there's a clear difference here. President Obama and the Democrats say, look, if we put your money into private accounts, what would have happened in 2007, 2008 when the stock market went down? And so I think that that's a clear difference. We don't have any idea that privatization plays a role in regard to Social Security. We do not want to change, as Democrats, the Social Security system fundamentally. And I believe that's a real difference. Now, I think that, yes, we're going to have to come to grips with what we're going to be able to do, but it should not be at the expense of those people who have paid into the system and are dependent upon that. You know, my grandmother, if it hadn't been for Social Security, after I remember in the 50s, on a small farm, she would have been lost. Right. Wouldn't have had income to carry on. So we think that that's the Democratic tradition, and that's the way the President Obama is going forward.
Well, and there definitely has to be some something done, because as you said, the number of people getting into the senior, the above 65, where you might be qualified for Social Security is going to balloon way up. So there has to be some kind of adjustment done on that. I'm not sure how you say, and this obviously isn't the Democratic position, so I don't know that you can answer it, so I'm just going to put it out there. This is how you say, well, we should have private accounts that are supplemental, because a lot of people on Social Security who are contributing to Social Security are not the people making a ton of money that says, okay, I will pay my Social Security, my payroll tax into Social Security, and now I got all this extra money that I'll put into a private account. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I don't think it makes any sense either, and I think that's one of the reasons that Vice President Biden looked into the camera and said, well, who do you trust on this issue? Because the track record, you know, when you vote for a president and a vice president, you're not just voting for those particular people. You're voting for the folks who are going to be backing them in the Congress and the people that they answer to. And it is without doubt, if all you have to do is look at the Republican majority in the House of Representatives, and you will see danger to Social Security written all over that majority.
Right. Well, and you raise an interesting point, because we talk about the president and him running for office and him having, you know, these big leads in the polls, depending on which poll you're reading. But absent a Senate that stays Democratic, absent would be lovely if we could get the House with at least a little less lopsided than it is right now. There's not a lot you can do, particularly when you have in the Senate Mitch McConnell saying in 2010 his #1 goal is to ensure that Obama fails and doesn't get reelected. So you have to have that, as we call it, down ballot. When people go in, they need to do the president, they need to do the Senate in Virginia for Tim Kaine, and then whoever the Democrat is. And you know the Democrats this year because they all have D's next to their name, as opposed to our local elections, which sometimes they don't. And is that something that seniors, does that resonate with seniors?
Seniors are obviously concerned about things other than Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, Social Security. Those are core and primary issues. The economy is very much an employment on their minds. You know, about a third of seniors, if you define them over the age of 55, are actively involved in the workforce. And even when you get to 65, it's like 25%. So they're concerned about how the economy goes. And you're absolutely right in that the other people who are elected, Tim Kaine, Jerry Connolly, make a real difference, because otherwise you have a self-fulfilling prophecy. Right. People are against something and they make it come true.
That's exactly right. Well, we can hear the music, which means we are finishing up the show. I want to thank you, Ray, for coming. I appreciate the conversation and the good work you're doing with our seniors.
Thank you very much.
So folks, get out and vote. November 6th, it's up to you. Vote the whole ballot, not just the president. Stay with us. Thank you.